The gap between education and emotional well-being. Why resilient support isn't optional anymore. So, hello and welcome back to the Resilient Kid podcast with me, Ashley Costello. This week feels really reflective for me. As you know, if you're on the newsletter, my youngest turned 16 last year at school. He's 6'2", thoughtful, handsome, and on the edge of becoming a man. And we had his friends stay over. Big family party. It's been a quieter week at home. And since the craziness of the weekend. And I was watching him. And he was, he's been making dinner. It's half term. He's helping clean up. He's popping next door to see his nana, the whole thing. And, it really made me think, who are we building the education systems for? Because, well, are we building a system that nurtures young people and who they're trying to become? Or are we asking them to constantly adapt under pressure? Now, before I go any further, I want to be very clear. Schools are not failing. I want to say that they are stretched. I'm not sure that I can say both of those. I do absolutely think schools, the budgets, the teachers are stretched beyond belief. Are they failing? In the most part, some, yes, are. I think they do it intentionally? No. And I think that distinction is really important, because what I'm seeing when I go into schools, the schools that we train in, the families that we support, the young people that we work with, isn't a failure of care. It's a capacity issue. It's the pressure. It's that pressure that the teachers, that the kids are under, that the system under, is creating a gap. The reality schools are facing, and we kind of see this all the time through the CPD work that we do, the resilient school training that we do, is rising anxiety in primary age kids, emotional dysregulation, and that presents as behaviour often, staff carrying huge emotional containment demands, increased neurodiversion identification, and those kids masking hugely, and then performance pressure filtering down from staff to teens and just going younger and younger. So teachers are not just teaching, they are regulating nervous systems, they are mediating social conflicts, they are absorbing the emotion that is pent up in that classroom. And they are often the only safe adult in that room of what can be up to 30 odd kids. And they're tired. And I think by this time of year, February half term, you can feel it. Children are tired, staff are tired, and we as parents are tired. And for me, the system is structured. It's structured around academics, assessment, safeguarding, performance. But where's the emotional regulation? Where's the preventative resilience work? Where's that shared language between home and school? And that's why, for me, a lot of our job is to be the advocate for the child or the teen in that school setting, to be the advocate, because there's a gap. There's just that gap. And what we're doing is we're not seeing the kids. We're not seeing or meeting them where they're at. We're not listening to the kids, that's for sure. For me, that emotional well-being gap, we know we have behavioural policies in school, curriculum frameworks, Ofsted standards, safeguarding protocols. I could go on all day. But what we haven't embedded is the emotional scaffolding that these kids need. I feel like I'm banging the same drum that I was when I did my TEDx talk in 2019, in the fact that, yes, we're using computers. Yes, we can use technology. Why is it then we are still learning information by rote when we can look it up in 0.5 seconds? Why are we not teaching these kids emotional regulation tools, we're often left reacting to crisis rather than building a capacity, building a school that is safe for the staff, safe for the kids. And when I mean safe, I mean psychologically safe. And we delivered some training last week in a school, and I said psychological safety. And one of the SLT went, "Oh, that sounds really harsh." And actually, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by psychologically safe? Is where people have someone to turn to. They have a key person. You think we pluck these kids out of primary where they have the same teacher all year. If they've fallen, cut their knee, they know who to go to. If they hurt themselves, they know who to go to. If somebody else has hurt them, if they are upset about something, if they've lost something, if they don't know how to do something, they have got that safe adult. They know exactly who to go to. And everybody in that school knows their name. Everybody in that school knows their family. And then yet what we do is we put them into this senior/high school setting where they have gone from one of 200 and odd kids to there's that many in their year group. And now there's 1,500 kids in the high school. They are mixing with various different ages, a lot of them that they don't know. A lot of the teachers don't know them until they start moving up through the years. And it's in a noisy environment that is often narrow, low ceilings, bright lights. Everybody goes to lunch at the same time. They might all have various designated areas to hang about in at lunch and at break. But do you know that I would guesstimate 75% of our kids don't sit down to eat their lunch? And I'll just pause there because actually that's hit me just as much. And I'm in a school every day. We are often encouraged to sit down and eat with our families. Sit down with your kids, chat over the day. Don't do that at school. Absolutely, we don't do that at school. They go, they grab and go. Their lunch, it's a wrap, it's a plastic container. They're eating fish and chips. They're eating, wrap, salad bar, jacket, whatever it is, it's in the hand. There is very few of our kids actually sitting down with their friends and eating together. There is no adults that I know of that sit down with those kids and eat in a school setting. That, to me, those kind of things we're asking our kids to put up with. I was going to use a different phrase then, but put up with is exactly right. Those kids are putting up with this. We're making them adapt to what we need. And actually, it's not fair and it's not right. We're having to support children when they're already overwhelmed with the day. We refer when things are already escalated. What if we weren't reactive? What if we built in resilience? What if it was preventative? Because this is what we know from research. During the teenage years, that part of the brain that seeks excitement and intensity and it develops faster, than the part responsible for impulse control or long-term thinking. So we have these big feelings, big reactions, big risks, and without fully developed brakes. Now, let's look at the layers to this. Academic pressure, social comparison, online exposure. And just as a side note, there is a big campaign led by lots of people, Esther Gray, friend of Resilient Kid, Joe Frost, lots and lots of people are calling for a social media ban until they're 16. Okay, it's not just about exposure. We need to be looking at what our little ones, the technology that they're using too. I'll get back. Reduced creativity outlets. When we're little and we have those creative outlets, it is amazing and what it does for the brain, how it wires it, how it fires it is absolutely fantastic. And actually that's all reduced once they go into school. And there is a huge fear around failure as well, because we compare. We constantly get the kids to compare to each other. So it's not surprising we're seeing burnout younger and younger. And it's not, burnout used to be a word that we would talk about corporate adults, not anymore. We're seeing this in year 6, and it's terrifying. We're seeing highly functioning anxiety in teens who look fine on paper because academically they're doing okay, but they're absolutely exhausted. And this isn't about blaming schools. Like, teachers are doing the best that they can in a system that is simply broken and not fit for purpose. But we have to acknowledge the weight of the young nervous systems that we're carrying, and I think I just spoke a little bit about creativity. We know Sir Ken Robinson talks about this all the time. You know, I don't think schools set out to suppress creativity intentionally, but when performance becomes more visible than curiosity, when testing becomes more urgent than exploring, when time pressure reduces play and risk taking, then something gets squeezed. And creativity requires feeling safe. It requires room to experiment, tolerance of mistakes, and space. And actually, the classroom's getting smaller and smaller, and there's more and more kids getting in them. So, under constant evaluation of kids, creativity narrows very, very quickly. We know in high schools, you used to have DT, design and technology, woodwork for those of my age. We used to do home economics where you would do cooking, you used to do music and drama, and they all used to run alongside each other. Now, you should get 6 weeks of one, then you change 6 weeks of another, and 6 weeks, that. And it's not because teachers don't value it, but because our systems reward measurable outcomes. And so we have young people adapting beautifully, for the most part, to a structure until they don't. And then they lose connection to who they are, to that curious part of themselves, to the part that, and that's the part that concerns me most, because when identity becomes performance-based, mental health becomes very, very fragile for our young people. Very fragile. Why is it, do we think then, some young people disengage from school? Well, it's rarely because they don't care. It's more often than not because they feel misunderstood, because they feel not academic, because there's not an outlet for those kids who are not scoring the big numbers in exams. They feel chronically overwhelmed. They don't feel seen. They don't feel heard. And in honesty, in my experience, talking to these young people, listening to these young people, they feel like they're the problem in school. And when belonging feels threatened, that's when the behaviour shifts. And that's when you get those kids who can't go to school, right? We talk about school refusal. I think it's rarely refusing to go to school, is they can't go to school. They don't feel safe enough to go to school, and school is a place that we should feel like we belong. Like, everything in us is pulling away from parents and identifying with that peer group, identifying that this is my tribe. Belonging's not a reward, it's a nervous system need. It's a DNA need that we have. And if that need isn't met consistently, that's where anxiety rises. They get defensive. They avoid. Avoidance is a stress response. It's an absolute stress response. And that gap widens. Now, there's part of me who says we don't need to dismantle this system. We don't need to tear it down. And there's part of me that goes, oh my God, we've got to start from scratch. But what I know is that we have got to strengthen that emotional scaffolding around it. We need a shared language between home and school. We need staff that are trained in emotional containment. We need to think about preventative measures, preventative resilience teaching, practical tools they can use every day, the teachers and the kids, and not just theory around this, and support for the adults just as much as the children. So when I was in a school in Abu Dhabi, I was very lucky that my immediate boss, my line manager, had a background in psychology. Hi, Nicola, if you're listening. And she was really forward thinking. The principal, not so much, but she would give me kind of carte blanche into taking programs into the younger years. She would, help me help the staff and their well-being. There was 2,000 of us in this huge school. 200 staff, 1,800 kids from 2.5 up to 21. And, it was just as important that the staff had access to me as a psychotherapist as it was the kids. Now you think, God, 2,000, how do you fit them all in? Well, we did a lot of preventative work in the younger years. We did a lot of preventative work so that as they grew, they weren't needing us. But actually, the staff well-being meant that their first port of call was to go to teachers or teaching assistants, not come directly to me. So it meant that preventative work was really good, but it also meant we looked after the staff so they could help the kids as well. And I will credit my work in that school is why I created the Resilient Kid Framework, because I could see how it worked on every age group and how we supported, how we met the kids where they were at, how we supported the staff in the role that they did. And I think I wish we didn't need a service like ours. Or I wish this service was for everyone, but I wish there wasn't a need. We're not here to replace schools. We're not here to criticize schools. We're here to fill that gap. We're here to partner with those schools. I'd say the biggest part of my job is advocating for those kids in school, without a doubt. Educating the parents and working with the kids. And that's the fun part for us. That's to see their change, to see, to sit down with a young person, irrespective of age, and really see them is a privilege. But for me, I want to give the schools the practical tools for regulation, for belonging, for confidence, for resilience. Help parents understand what's happening developmentally and to support the kids before they get into crisis, irrespective of age. And this is where, for me, it gets interesting. Because if you're listening to this and you work in education or therapy or coaching or youth support, and you've had that feeling, that sense of, we could be doing more. You're not imagining it because there is a gap. There is an absolute gap. And gaps create opportunity, not opportunistic, opportunity in a leadership sense, opportunity to build emotional infrastructure around education, opportunity to create that consistency within that gap and to change outcomes long term, because that's what we're doing and we're growing because the need is growing. And what I would say to you is, if you're listening to this as a teacher, as a head, as a TA, as a family support worker, you'll know what I'm talking about. You're in the system, work in the system, and you see those gaps all the time. And we see you. We see that hard work. So, to finish off, as I watched my son this week, 16, steady, becoming himself, I realised something. He didn't become this version of himself because of pressure. He became this version of himself, which will change because of the support around him, because of the people that turned up for his party, because of his friends, his tribe that he belongs to, because of conversations that he's had, because boundaries that have been held with connection. I often get that, oh, your kids are really well behaved. Well, no, they're not always, but actually it takes hard work. But what I will say to you is, the system matters, but the scaffolding around that matters so much more. And if we want confident, emotionally intelligent young people, resilience can't be an afterthought. It has to be intentional and it has to be preventative. So, thank you for this short, sharp episode, for listening. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a professional, I'd love to carry on this conversation. So please get in touch, drop me a message, ashley@theresilientkid.co.uk, or comment underneath. But we'd absolutely love to continue this conversation. And if you are in the system, working in the system, and you want to be part of the conversation, drop us a message, come on the podcast. We'd love to have you.